Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla Hilson, and today I will be presenting an overview of the 2022 Learning Forward Standards for Professional Learning. This presentation is a part of my work for the EDLD 7537 class at Georgia Southern University. As educators, we know that professional learning is most effective when it leads to meaningful changes in classroom practice and it ultimately improves student outcomes. So, the Learning Forward Standards, they provide a framework for making that happen. So, today I'm going to walk you through each of the 11 standards and we're going to discuss the importance in supporting both educator growth and student success. Okay. So to begin, the Learning Forward standards, they were updated in 2022 to reflect current research and best practices in professional learning. These standards, they're much more than just recommendations. They serve as a guide for creating professional learning experiences that can be ongoing, collaborative, and especially focused on improving student achievement. So the standards, they're organized into three categories as you see on the screen. We have learning practices, learning drivers, and learning foundations. So today, these standards, they help schools move away from that one-time workshops and towards that continuous learning that should be embedded in everyday practice. And so again, the ultimate goal is to strengthen educator effectiveness and student outcomes for students. So we're going to jump right on in with the first standard, which is a learning practices. This standards remind us that effective teaching begins with truly knowing our students. Educators, they definitely must understand students' backgrounds, their experiences, strengths, the communities that they come from. And when we take the time to build strong relationships with students and families, we create learning environments where students feel valued, respected, and supported. So this particular standard of learning practices, it encourages educators to recognize and build upon student assets rather than focusing solely on their deficits. As we know, this happens sometimes. But by doing so, we create more engaging and meaningful learning experiences that help students reach their full potential. So, the second standard is curriculum assessment and instruction, and this is the iterative loop as you see on the screen. This standard, it emphasizes the importance of using high quality instructional materials in Georgia. Now, that's a thing, HQIM. So, those high quality instructional materials and aligning those teaching practices with curriculum expectations. Um, Professional learning, it should help educators deepen the understanding of curriculum and actually learn how to implement it effectively. That's key, is learning how to implement these programs effectively. It also highlights the role of assessment, as you see, using aligned assessments. Assessments should provide meaningful information about student learning and guide instructional decisions because we know as educators we have to use our assessment data effectively because if not, it can really have a huge impact on our instruction. But when we use it effectively, we can adjust that instruction. Can provide that targeted support and ensure students are making their progress towards their learning goal. Okay, the third standards is professional expertise. And this is something I clearly believe in that educators are should be lifelong learners. And as educators, we know that learning should never stop. This standard focus on that continuously developing the knowledge and skills needed to be effective in our roles because we know as the years progress, um, data progresses, knowledge progresses, so many things progress also as the years go by. So we need to be um, in the loop and ahead of the game. So our professional learning should be grounded in that research, professional standards, and evidence-based practices. It should also be aligned with school and district priorities so that our individual growth contributes to the organizational improvement. Um, I know that when we are teachers, instructional coaches, specialists, as myself, administrators, we all have a responsibility in refining those practices and continuing to grow professionally. All right, moving on into a learning drivers. This standard it challenges educators to reflect on their own beliefs, reflect on their assumptions, and reflect on their biases, and consider how those beliefs influence teaching and learning. It also emphasizes the importance of collaboration and learning from diverse perspectives. By working together and valuing different experiences, we know that educators can create those equitable opportunities for students. But at its core, this standard right here just basically reminds us that every student deserves access to that high quality instruction, regardless of their background or circumstances. So, as you see on this infographic, it says identify and remove barriers, and it branches out to examine those biases and equitable learning opportunities, access to that high quality instruction, and embracing those diverse perspectives. Okay, the fifth standard is evidence. In education, decisions should be based on more than just assumptions and personal opinions. I know that's a difficult place to be in because sometimes we believe that our personal opinion sometimes overrules data, but not in this particular standard of evidence. Okay. This standard encourages educators to use multiple sources of data and evidence to guide professional learning and instructional decisions. This evidence can come from student assessments, classroom observations, surveys, if you've done any type of research, and any other sources. Because if we examine the information regularly, then educators can determine what is working, they can identify those areas for improvement, and also they can make those adjustments if needed. So, this particular standard helps us measure whether our professional learning efforts are actually improving student outcomes. So, again, we're collecting, we're analyzing, we're monitoring, and then lastly, we measure. The sixth standard is a learning design. This standard it recognizes that adults learn best when professional learning is purposeful, engaging, and relevant to work. Okay. So, just like we differentiate or DI instruction for our students, PL should be designed to meet the diverse needs of educators as well. Effective learning experiences, they may include opportunities for collaboration, reflection, feedback, practice, and application. um, when professional learning is intentionally designed around how adults learn, educators they seem to be a little bit more likely to transfer their new knowledge and skills into the classroom practice. So it definitely has to be relevant to the adult learning experience. Implementation. So we often hear great ideas during PL sessions, but implementation is where the real work begins. This standard focus on supporting educators as they put their new learning into practice. I would say that successful implementation requires that ongoing coaching, collaboration, feedback, mentoring, but it requires like patience. Because being meaningful having meaningful changes do not just happen overnight. So patience is key. When schools invest in supporting implementation over time, um I think the new practices they become part of the culture rather than just another initiative that fades away. So our eighth standard is a learning foundation. This standard it focuses on creating conditions necessary for professional growth, but continuous professional growth. Sc- I'm so sorry. Schools and districts, they must establish expectations that PL is an ongoing part of an educator's work and not just an occasional event. Learning foundations also emphasize equitable access to professional learning opportunities because we all know that every educator should have the support, resources, and opportunities needed to grow and improve, because when these foundations are in place, continuous learning becomes part of our organizational culture. All right, we moving right along. We are now into our ninth standard, which is the culture of collaborative inquiry. Um, I'm gonna say that many educators, they connect this standard to PLCs, or we call them professional learning communities. This standard emphasizes the importance of educators working together to like analyze data, solve problems, share ideas, improve instructional practice. It doesn't support working in isolation. Because educators, they engage in ongoing cycles of inquiry, reflection, and action. So, a strong culture of collaborative inquiry, it actually creates a shared ownership of student success and helps ensure that decisions are made based on evidence and collective expertise and not just one person's um opinion or one person's data set. The 10th standard is leadership. As you see on the screen in front of you, effective PL requires strong leadership at every level. Leaders, they have to establish a vision for learning. As we see at the top, you have to establish a vision for learning. They also need to communicate expectations and create the conditions that's necessary for growth. They also advocate for resources, time, support educators, um, needs in order to engage them in professional learning that is meaningful. Okay. So this might be um the most important one of all, because effective leaders, they have to model continuous learning themselves and demonstrate that growth is a priority for everyone within the organization. And we know that this can be a difficult task when it comes to modeling continuous learning. So this leadership and directing and protecting the vision is a key standard in PLCs. And then we get to our final standard, which is resources. Now, I will say, while financial resources are important, this standard goes beyond budgeting. If you notice, it's focusing on how schools strategically allocate their time, their personnel, their technology, um, and their expertise in supporting professional learning. Resources should be aligned with identified needs and used in a way that maximizes the impact. um, I will say that schools have to monitor the effectiveness of these investments, okay, to make sure that they're actually producing those meaningful results. Because when resources are used correctly or strategically, those PLs becomes more sustainable and more effective. So as we conclude these learning forward standards, all 11 of them, they basically provide a comprehensive roadmap for creating those meaningful professional learning experiences. And these meaningful professional learning experiences are meant to improve educators' practice and student achievement. So together, all 11 standards, they basically emphasize collaboration, continuous improvement, evidence based decision making, strong leadership, and equitable learning opportunities. So, as educational leaders, our responsibility is not simply to just provide professional development, but to create those systems that support ongoing learning and growth. So, when these standards are implemented effectively, both educators and students benefit. So, thank you for your time and attention. The references used to support this presentations are listed on this slide. And I encourage you to explore the Learning Forward resources yourself, so that you can gain a deeper understanding of the research and evidence behind these standards and the impact that they have on professional learning. Thank you again.